We just had the Democratic National Convention. The RNC Day 1 is today, and what better person to discuss that with us and preview it is Amber Athey, Washington editor from Spectator USA. Amber, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, thank you.
So, Amber, before we get to the RNC, and we're going to preview that, I just want to get your take on the DNC. I mean, what were your thoughts on it last week?
It seemed to me that there wasn't really a cohesive theme at the Democratic National Convention. There was a lot of platitudes, a lot of talk about very vague values, but there wasn't really a policy platform that it seemed Biden and his running mate Kamala Harris were really running on. And so I think if voters were watching that, looking for an alternative to Trump, they might have, heard this message about being very anti-Trump that they liked. But if they were looking for some set of policies or something that the ticket intended to accomplish once in office, they would have been very disappointed.
Yeah, I agree with you that it was a little light on policy. I thought Biden's speech, he did name about 15 or 20, policy changes. But at the same time, I do agree with you. And I did talk about that last week, that eventually they're going to have to talk more policy. And I think they could have done more about. Okay, so let's move on now to the RNC. Can you first talk to me a little bit about the speakers that are going to be speaking tonight throughout the week? And it's my understanding, and you can tell me if this is not true, I've heard that Donald Trump is expected to speak every night?
That's right. Trump is supposed to speak at every night of the convention during the 10 o'clock hour. So the schedule is the same as the DNC. They have a few things during the day, but the primetime programming will take place from 9 to 11 p.m. each evening, and that's when the speakers will be broadcast, of course, across the cable networks, provided they all choose to carry them. I'm sure Fox will, MSNBC, and CNN. I'm not so sure, but there's quite a diverse lineup of speakers. You kind of have, I think, really two sort of themes going on here. You have more of the culture war type speakers. So you have, for example, the St. Louis couple that famously pulled their guns out in front of their home when the Black Lives Matter protesters came through their property. You have people like Charlie Kirk, who, of course, runs Turning Point USA. And then you have more of the sort of establishment policy type people. So you have Nikki Haley and Tom Cotton and some other members of Congress. So it seems like they're trying to do something to hit both sides of the base, which is the people who, of course, voted for Trump because they loved his policies and they love the idea of Trumpism. And then you have sort of the more cultural response to things that were happening at the DNC, whether that's the focus on Black Lives Matter or not denouncing the riots, things like that.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about, because you use the term diversity, and this is, you can call it a talking point, but I know a lot of people on the left, and I'm not one of those people, but I certainly agree with what they're saying about the diversity factor. Yes, I get it. You have Congressman Scott that's going to be speaking. You have Ben Carson that's going to be speaking, two African Americans.
Yeah, you have Michelle Malsick as well.
Yeah. But the point that a lot of people on the left are saying is, well, wait a second, look at all the women of color that spoke at the DNC. What would you say to that when you do talk about the term diversity and you talk about the McCloskeys that are speaking? You talk about Nicholas Sandmann that's going to be speaking. Mm-hmm. Is that really true diversity?
Well, they also have Kim Klacik, who just released the most watched congressional ad ever. She's running for the Republican ticket in Baltimore to represent Baltimore in Congress. She's a young black woman. But, the Republican Party, I think, would make a mistake to sort of play into the identity politics of the left. That's something that's been wholeheartedly rejected by everyday Americans. It's something that might appeal to the academic lefty types. But when you're talking about Trump's base, or even the people that Biden is trying to court, which is really this sort of blue-collar, middle America person that feels like they've been left behind by the political system, this sort of empty diversity that is based on skin color and not on intellectualism is really something that just doesn't appeal to them, and nor should it, because it's kind of an empty way of making a point. There's no substance really to it. And I think really we should move on in politics from the idea that there is inherently some certain value because a person looks a certain way.
Okay, I don't disagree with what you just said, But I will ask you this question because I don't know if I know the answer to it. If that is the case and we're just trying to find the most intelligent people, why have we only had one black president, and why have we never had a vice president that is black? Is it just because they haven't been qualified and they haven't been smart enough? Or is it the fact that maybe there is some racism in the history of this country?
Well, yeah, I don't think, rejecting identity politics is the same as saying that black people had to deal with a history of slavery in the U.S. And certainly that might have led to them not being able to be involved in the political system for a much longer time than white people.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
I'm as pro-Trump as anyone you'll probably ever talk to, and I think they actually missed the mark on this one. I think that what is there, 5 or 6 of Trump's family that are speaking? I think that Larry Elder, Leo Terrell, Candace Owens, Brandon Straka, and Scott Pressler. I think people like that should be speaking. I mean, they have such a strong digital presence. And you mentioned how you kind of have the establishment Republicans, and you've got those on the other side as well. But do you think that they kind of missed the mark by having so many of Trump's family speak and not those I just mentioned?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think what this says is that the RNC and the Republican Party more broadly are really unprepared for what the party is going to look like after Trump. And granted, there's really 4 years until they have to fully grapple with that question. But if Trump loses in November, then they're going to have to come to terms with that much sooner. And clearly, by not having people who really embrace Trump policies without necessarily being Trump shills or members of his family is not a good sign. I just tweeted yesterday, actually, that I thought they should have had Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio speak, because Josh Hawley, of course, has sort of embraced this populist nationalist agenda on big tech policy.
And he's very smart,
and Rubio
too.
has done the same on family policy.
Yeah.
And if you're really talking about what Trumpism looks like after this sort of reality show, very filled with a presence person, then you have to start looking into the policies. And it seems like the people that they chose to represent the policy wing of the party are people who have really been more of the establishment, free market, conservatarian type.
So I have to ask, we have Hogan Gidley on the show from time to time. He's going to be coming on our show tomorrow, of course, campaign, really the head of the campaign for 2020. So if you had a chance to sit down with Hogan Gidley now and you wanted to ask him a little bit about the RNC and your questions or concerns, what would you ask Hogan Gidley? Because we'll probably be asking him tomorrow.
Yeah, I think you should definitely ask him what policy, what cohesive set of policies and values are they planning on presenting at the RNC? Mm-hmm. Because when I look at the difference between the DNC and the RNC, I think the thing that will be most effective is presenting really a vision for America rather than just this disjointed set of speakers for merely entertainment purposes. There really should be something that's presented to voters to say, here is your alternative to the Democratic Party, and offering them something comprehensive and cohesive in terms of a vision.
Speaking of policy, President Trump just released his second-term agenda. Did you get a chance to take a look at that, and what did you like the most about it?
I did. I thought there was a lot to like in it. I think certainly focusing on returning manufacturing to America, as well as lowering drug prices, and some of the policies he laid out under education in terms of school choice were a really good start. I did notice that there were a few things missing. There really wasn't much in the way of family policy, whether that's paid family leave or making childcare more affordable. There was no mention of the Second Amendment, which, of course, is a huge issue for Trump's base. And he also didn't mention anything about the opioid epidemic, which, as you'll recall, was something that was really high on his list of campaign issues back in 2016, and is something that he really focused on, I would say, through 2018 and maybe even 2019 before the issue kind of fell to the wayside. And again, when we're talking about middle America, blue-collar voters, the opioid epidemic has absolutely ravaged those areas of the country. And I think it was a huge missed opportunity for him not to mention that in his second-term agenda.
And that was a big part of Melania Trump as well. She's been a big advocate for that. And I agree with you. I'm surprised that wasn't in there. I have to ask you this before we let you go, because we've been covering this. It's certainly a national story. You know that Donald Trump's niece, she put this book out and a lot of disparaging things about Donald Trump. Now we hear of Donald Trump's sister, a former judge, who said some extremely disparaging things about Donald Trump, a cheater, a liar, so on and so forth. And now there's a story that just came out today. We're learning that Melania Trump has, was recorded by one of her friends, and that's going to be coming out. Apparently, she says some disparaging things about her husband and about Ivanka Trump. What are your thoughts on these stories that came out, and do you think it'll affect the election in November?
No, I don't think it will. I think my personal opinion on it, and I think this is probably the same for a lot of people, is that family is very valuable and loyalty is very valuable. And so when you see people who choose to speak publicly about issues that they had that were more personal or family related, I think that's really disappointing to see. And it's not something that really smacks of character, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Well, Amber, you do a great job with Spectator USA. Always appreciate it when you take some time to join us, and look forward to talking to you again before the elections. Okay, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good day, y'all.
You too.
Thanks a lot,
That
Amber.
is Amber Athey, Washington editor for Spectator USA. All right.